Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our discussion of poetry. Is Charles Clifford Brooks III, and we're going to be talking about Robert Frost today. And without further ado, I'll hand the mic over to him and let him discuss Mending Wall.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is a beautiful day here in Georgia. And as the seasons change and fall deepens in my roots, I pull out Robert Frost. And I've been reading him for the last couple of weeks. And as many may want to jump to assume, we're not going to be talking about A Road Less Traveled. We're going to be reading the poem Mending Wall. Robert Frost, like Carl Sandburg, like Walt Whitman, is one of my favorite of all poets who tell stories that are not cryptic, but extremely accessible with enough elasticity there that you can read your own life into it, but generally carry away the sentiment that the poet meant, what they embedded within the verse. Robert Frost was a humble man. He was a funny man. He had a great sense of humor and had a talent with irony that's almost unmatched in poetry. He was never so full of himself, even as poet laureate of the nation, that he couldn't laugh at himself. And like so many that have a great sense of humor, he also had the dark days that he would have to battle, a sadness that sometimes would edge him towards drastic measures to take his own life. And luckily, thank God, he didn't. JFK adored Robert Frost, and for the right reasons, and was public about his feelings about Robert Frost. Mending Wall is a poem that revolves around the idea that there's not a need for distance between two people so much. Now, I am going to have to say, I believe with Frost's neighbor, who in this poem keeps saying, whenever Frost kind of says, isn't it silly that we're repairing this wall in the middle of this orchard where there's nothing to steal and no cattle to get free and no one to keep out? Why are we doing this? And his neighbor keeps saying, good walls make good neighbors. Good walls make good neighbors. And I am a proponent of this. I am a fan. I like distance. I like my privacy. As a writer, as many artists, we have to have that alone time. But Frost was a little more social. He thought that the mending of the wall was kind of funny. He never made it a confrontational issue with his neighbor. He would meet him out there every time. And every time as they got older, I can see Frost kind of saying, man, are we really going to do this again? I mean, I will. It's totally cool. You know, we can chat along the way. But his neighbor was a little more of a stoic fellow. He liked to have a line drawn in the sand, and in this case was a wall. And I think, like him, again, I have to agree with his neighbor, having that distance is just healthy. I think that whether it be in your person or with your property, having that, whether it be metaphorical or literal line in the sand, just keeps people healthy, keeps people and boundaries defined. And maintaining that line, whether it be with people or with your neighbor, so with your property line, I think maintaining those boundaries and keeping that sense of self true is very important. Just like walls make good neighbors in some cases, many cases, I think that in business contracts with friends, keep you friends. It's that same idea of a line in the sand. Frost went to college, never got a formal degree, but went to several. He was a teacher. He tried farming in England. That didn't work out. He was a big fan of Ezra Pound, and he never fell to the trappings of a certain form or fad of poetry. That's why I really adore him again as a poet, because he used the vernacular. He used the language of the people, the way we really speak, like Walt Whitman did, like Carl Sandburg did, like Langston Hughes did. That is its own kind of genius in poetry. So enough with Robert Frost. Perhaps next week, the week after, we'll do A Road Less Taken, because I would like to get into that and the real meaning that he had within it. And the truth that even if people did take away from it, that the road less traveled does lead you to a higher sense of self and more success with that extra effort put in and the reward earned. Even if it wasn't what Frost necessarily meant, it still doesn't take away from the poem. It still doesn't make it any less brilliant. And really the true meaning, his meaning is quite funny. But we'll steer back to Mending Wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen ground swell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun. And it makes gaps, even two can pass abreast, the work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made. But it's spring, mending time, we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. To each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves, and some are so nearly balls we have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side. It comes to little more, there where we do not need the wall. He is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines. I tell him, and he only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly. And I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there, bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, good fences make good neighbors. The way, Frost, the beauty of this is that to expound upon it, to tear it apart, to analyze it, and cut the meat of this to the marrow is unnecessary. Because Frost was so brilliant with his ability to use his own thoughts, literally as they pour from his head. You see him writing this. You hear this conversation he has with this very stoic neighbor, where Frost, again, he's spring makes mischief in me. Again, he outright says there's a childishness in him. There's a little bit of an immaturity in him that I think maintains a good heart, that keeps us all young. That saying to be a little childish, to be a little immature, in this case is not a bad thing. That his neighbor is just probably heavy-browed. I see him, again, holding two stones or a stone in each hand, coming along like a savage to put them back on the line. And then he over there is thinking, this one is so round, it's like, we have to cast a spell to keep it in place. And then saying and shaking his finger, now you stay right there until we turn our backs. You see this dichotomy, this difference between the two men. Frost saying, all you got are some pine trees over there, brother. And I've got a bunch of apple trees, and I don't see my apple trees ever kind of coming over to your side and messing with your pine trees. Why is this wall coming up? Before I built a wall, I would wonder who I've offended to need this wall, or what am I trying to keep out? What gremlins are on your side? What devils are on mine? What use is this wall? Even nature doesn't seem to like it because it swells up and turns it over as soon as we get done. Hunters come through and knock it down to get the rabbits out so their yelping dogs will shut up and they get the reward of a good dinner that evening. There's an entire world happening in this poem. And this neighbor, almost like that raven in Poe's poem that only keeps saying, nevermore, nevermore. This neighbor, no matter how playful Frost gets, keeps saying, good fences make good neighbors. Again, the beauty of it is that it's a true story. This actually happened. So you get to put yourself in real time in a sense that's timeless. No matter when you read it, right back with him in those woods with this funny poet and this dour old man going along the same day in the spring when he's feeling a little more loose and playful and saying maybe elves came along, but it really wasn't elves. And I'd rather him say it and cut up a little bit, but he doesn't. My neighbor just says, good fences make good neighbors. Now, again, as much as that essence of childhood and that need to laugh and be playful is alive in me as it is in Luke, as I hope it is in you, I still have to say that I'm on the side of that fence with that stone-carrying savage that likes to have everything in its place and a clean line drawn, no love lost, but a reminder to both that a little space is good. And in a society now that is so inundated with social media and in each other's business and everyone being able to know where everyone's at all the time, I think having a little bit of a wall there is a good thing. I truly hope that people go back and read the poems that I select to not reinforce what I think, but to pull out what they think, to read it maybe anew, read it aloud. And during the speaking parts, his use of punctuation and grammar in the correct way. There are rules to poetry, and one of those that I'm most passionate about is that the same rules of grammar that apply to prose applies to poetry. Please, people, think. Because when you are aware and familiar and see the same kinds, then again, you don't feel so alienated by poetry. You have fingerprints, you have a familiar pathway into poetry that you are far more familiar with prose. It takes the fear out of it. Poetry is just a song spoken. That's truly what I believe. And in this case, we have the nature, we have apple trees, we have the pine cones, we have elves, we have the dour old man. And it could be in a metaphorical sense that this is two phases of Frost. Maybe, again, this is a true story, but in Frost's mind, there's the younger Frost and the elder Frost, and how maybe throughout time we get a little curmudgeon-y. And just as it is important to keep alive our youthfulness, having that more mature, that more world-wise side of us to say, it's been fun playing, but I need to go inside now. And then shutting that door is mending that wall. Having that privacy, getting offline, thinking your own thoughts is maintaining your own property. And I think that's very valuable. So please, look into Robert Frost. Go beyond the path less taken and read Mending Wall. I cannot thank you enough, Luke, for letting me do this. And I hope this fall day finds you as well as Sue.
Yeah, man, I really love this poem. I think what would be really interesting is for people to reimagine it with a lot of what's going on in this current political climate. I could see a new interpretive lens for this poem in light of a lot of the issues that we're discussing in this country. And that's probably a conversation for another day. And, we don't want to get too political here, but I think it might be something for people to reflect upon as they head to the voting booth too, is to see if Frost imparts any sort of wisdom in that regard.
I absolutely agree. I mean, the true key to brilliant poetry, to brilliant writing, I believe, is that it's timelessness. Again, as well as I do, that he did not for 1 minute conceive of Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, but how relative that idea of putting space there, again, and not trying to get too political, but again, how much do you want the government in your life? How much do you want them to hear? How much of a wall do you need to put between you and Big Brother? Again, these are ideas that I'm not trying to dip into and turn this sour, but again, that's the true timelessness of art as a whole, is its true test. Does it stand? Buildings fall, walls crumble, but words, emotion, immutable truths, they last. We last. The soul lasts.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Cliff. It's always, I can't believe that I get to do this for a vocation. I get to have someone, I get to wake up in the morning and have someone teach me poetry. It's a really cool gig. So I'll have this edited and put on the Noetic app immediately. If you guys are interested in taking this conversation with you, just download the Noetic app for your iPhone and Droid devices. And I guess I'll just be saying in transmission. Thank you, Cliff.
Have a good day, brother.
See you, man.